Hello dear. In today's session we're going to discuss noun clauses that start with question words. By the end of the session you will be able to identify noun clauses in sentences and use the correct structure of noun clauses that start with question words. Let's begin. It is useful to start this session with a little revision of how to make questions. Pause the video and write questions whose answers are the information bits in brackets. Remember to use the correct question words and the formal structure of the questions. The notes on the right are of much help to remind you of the rules. Here are the answers. See that the rules on the right are all applicable in the answers. Great! Now the central question is, do question words always introduce questions? That is to say, is it true that every time we see a question word, then the clause following it is a question? Take some time to ponder this. Let us see the answer in the coming part. Now look at the structures in blue. Do they start with question words? Of course they do. Do they introduce questions? No, they don't. Why is that? As you notice, the most significant sign of a question, which is helping verb before the subject, is not present, and thus these are not questions. Where she lives. It has a subject, she. It has a verb, lives. You know that in a question we should have a helping verb before the subject, then the main verb. So the question form of where she lives is where does she live? So as you notice here, it is not a question, although it starts with a question word. Now, these are not questions, and thus they do not end with question marks. But wait a second, we have a question mark here in number 3, and we have a question mark here in number 8. Why is that? Did you get it? In these two sentences, do you know is a question form. And in 8, do you know is a question form. Do you notice we have helping verb, then subject, then main verb. So the question mark here is related to the first group of words, which is a question. Do you know? Now, what language structure does each group of words in blue represent? I mean, is it a word, a phrase, or a clause? Did you guess it? Good job. They are all clauses because each has a subject and a verb. And by definition, a clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. Now, my second question is, what function do they have? I mean, are they acting like adjectives, adverbs, subjects, objects? These are taking the places of subjects or objects. Let's see how. In the first sentence, what is the verb of the main clause? The main clauses here are all the ones in black. So the verb is don't know. Now, what's the subject of I don't know? You already know that to find the subject, we ask what or who plus the verb. So here, who don't know or who doesn't know? I. So I is the subject of the main clause and don't know is the verb of the main clause. Now, what is the object of this clause? Again, you know that the question we ask is what plus subject plus verb. So, what don't I know? Do we have an answer? What don't I know? Great. Yes, the answer is where she lives. This is the thing I don't know. So this is the object of the sentence. Which sentence? The first one. So as you notice, where she lives is playing the role or functioning as the object of the first clause. In English, the object is a noun. So here we have a clause that's taking the place of a noun, so we call it a noun clause. Do you still remember? We talked previously about clauses that take the place of an adjective, those that start with who, which, whom, that, and we said they are adjective clauses because they take the place of an adjective. Now these are noun clauses because they take the place of the noun. In this situation, in number one, they take the place of the object. Now, what's special about these noun clauses is that they start with question words. And you notice that each one of these is introduced with a question word. And this is the main cause of the trouble they can lead to. Because learners of English usually grow up thinking that whenever they see a question word, then the structure they're working on is a question. Today, you should change that misconception forever. So, to sum up, we have noun clauses starting with question words. Do you remember? This was the title of this presentation. So by now you can define a noun clause starting with a question word, and you know it is not followed by a question form. It is not a question, so it doesn't end with a question mark, unless there is another question in the sentence, like number 3, do you know? And number 8, do you know? Please pause the video here and read the notes that summarize the previous information so far. Now, based on the information presented so far, how are questions and noun clauses different? Questions, there should be helping verbs before the subjects in most questions. They end with question marks. Noun clauses, the helping verbs are not necessary. The subjects are before the verbs and no question marks are used. Keep in mind that a question with its form, that is question word, helping verb, subject, main verb, is never a part of a longer sentence. It is always a unit by itself. When we need to include it in another sentence to make a complex sentence, for example, it becomes question word, subject, verb, etc. It is never included in another sentence. Whenever a question word is in another sentence, it introduces a noun clause, not a question. Change the question in parentheses to a noun clause. Remember, a noun clause is like an answer. I mean, it has the subject, then the verb. Pause the video and try to do the exercise. Keep in mind that most of the questions here have verb to do, that is do, does, or did. And you know that these are used in forming questions when the answer doesn't have a helping verb. And keep in mind also what happens to them as you answer. In addition, check the difference between sentences 3 and 4. Here are the answers. As you notice in this answer key, verb to do is cancelled as we answer the question as we change it into a noun clause. In addition, in sentence 3, the same order is there in the question and the noun clause because who is the subject in both cases. However, in 4, people is the subject and it is moved depending on the type of structure, whether a question or a noun clause. To sum up, questions and noun clauses with question words may have almost the same words. However, the order of the words is different.